Okay, well, Delia, thank you. So Delia and I have been friends for a while. We're still friends, right? Yeah. And she asked me to make a suggestion of what could we do at the forum. And I said, well, you haven't really talked about buying and selling art and head dealers. And she said, great, you do it. So I always do what Delia tells me, so here I am. And thank you also, we now have the most complete collection of Berkeley Law canvas bags, I think. And I'm going to ask Aaron afterwards to value my collection, see if there's a market for it. But
there's a market for everything.
And therein, great introduction. This is a very big topic, buying and selling art. I would use air quotes, because what one person defines as art, somebody else defines as, tomorrow's haul away garbage. I did bring, and I have a couple copies of this, because I think it illustrates, so this is a publication called Maine Antiques Digest, the most misnamed publication in America. It's not about Maine. It's not all just about antiques. It is a digest, but I'll put a couple copies out. If you flip through it, you will see the incredible variety of things that people are buying and selling, all under the rubric of art or collectibles, perhaps. And it's incredible, of number of things. I would say it's probably mostly Americana, and it's probably mostly dead artists, though some living artists. But it's just fascinating. And I went through a recent edition, just to get us into our subject, and counted the number of auction houses, not auctions, but the actual number of auction houses advertising in that month's publication, and came up with 32 different auction houses. Some are regional, some specialized, and not one of those was Christie's, Sotheby's, or Bonhams. So it is a very big area. Just looking at auction houses, I'm sure I didn't even scratch the surface of how many auction houses there are in the United States that can help you buy or sell things. And I won't even guess at the number of dealers claiming to be art dealers, let alone antiques dealers. I'm not sure you even have a number. And the amount, I can only guess, of the billions of dollars that is moving through auction houses and art dealers every year on since this is a legal conference, I would comment, generally on an unregulated basis. Because my friend Frank mentioned crypto, I have to mention crypto too. The people who advocate for crypto say, well, the art market's not regulated, why should we be regulated? So those of you who are here for CLE, now you can get your credit, as I mentioned crypto. So the bios, Frank and Aaron's bios are in there, but I'm going to ask each of them to just briefly say, well, how did you get into this business? I'll start with Frank, leave you on my far left here.
Okay. Well, I got into the art and antiques business basically through osmosis. My great-grandfather started a firm back in 1901 in New York, down on the Lower East Side, called Ginsberg and Levy. They slowly moved uptown and moved into better and better things. And my grandfather was in the business. I was actually very fortunate enough to know him for a good portion of my life, and my father as well. And now I am doing it too.
And we'll come back to this, but because the firm is frankly very prestigious in this area, a piece of an antique or a painting that came through that house or that dealer, Aaron can speak to this at some point, creates a provenance and perhaps its own, endorsement of that product. But we'll get to that. Aaron, what was your journey into the auction art world?
Much more circuitous. I went to UC Santa Cruz. I studied European history. I had every intention of becoming a lawyer. And while I was there, I got a work-study job. And I thought it sounded so cool. It said sculpture assistant. It's like, that's the greatest thing ever. It turns out a sculpture assistant is a janitor in a sculpture studio. But through that, just while I was going to school, I got a job at a local art museum doing installation work because I'm handy. And I moved to LA to go to law school. And Buddy in the interim said, hey, get you a job at an auction house, someone who I'd worked with at the small museum in Santa Cruz. And I said, cool, I'll do that. And then much to my parents' chagrin, I never left.
Okay, well, what you didn't mention is you are an appraiser on Antiques Roadshow.
Yes, so it's an exclusive club that maybe you don't want to be a member of. It is, the show's been on for decades now. I've done it since 2009. The only way to get on the show is essentially somebody else who's on the show can't make a location, and then someone who's on the show recommends, oh, Aaron could do this. So it's really, there's no application process. You have to be recommended by someone who's already on the show. And it is actually reality television. I think we, much to the chagrin of the producers, we lose every year to various reality programs that are not reality. But it is what it is.
And how many, everyone be honest, how many here have seen Antiques Roadshow? Right? How many here regularly watch Antiques Roadshow? Okay. Well, I want to get into this because I think there are kind of two issues, and as we talked about this, that people are probably most interested in. One is authentication of a particular item, and secondly, the price. So when something is appraised on Antiques Roadshow, they use, and they never explain this, by the way, the appraiser, depending on the appraiser, they will use one of three different valuations. Can you explain those valuations and maybe what the difference is?
Yeah, so some of it has to do with the object itself, I would say, and some of it has to do with the person appraising it. But the three types of values you'll hear are fair market value, you'll hear an auction estimate, and you'll hear insurance. Those values are not the same for the same object. And there are times where the person who's brought the object to us says, I'm never, ever, ever going to sell this, but I am curious as to what it should be insured for. And we will offer that information. But other times, there are a number of my colleagues on the show who are dealers in their specific category expertise, and how they transact within their world is they sell things through their gallery. So they're going to give you the value that they would know, which is the gallery value. I work at an auction house. I've only ever worked at auction houses, so I think in terms of auction estimate. So I would be making it up if I gave a retail value.
And the way they frame the fair market value, sometimes what I hear is the value in a retail shop, which I presume would be what a Frank Levy would charge you if that was, I'm interpreting.
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure that that's actually the definition of fair market value. I always understood it as, and I'm not an attorney, willing seller, willing buyer, they come to a price.
Yes, there's definitely nuance within that. Yeah, for sure. So Frank says it's $100,000. I say, sure, it's $100,000. Here you go, and we're done. That would be the retail value.
Yeah.
On the show, they're not really terribly concerned with the nitty-gritty in terms of the technical definition of what a fair market value is, as far as the IRS says, maybe something different, from that scenario, because that actually does involve within the standard, within a public auction, what would it bring?
On the Antiques Roadshow theme, so I didn't have a slide, but this cover piece, this piece of furniture, Frank has his own, probably has many Antiques Roadshow type experience. This table, which dates from 1750, I believe, Boston area, you can tell a story, but Frank got it at a small auction house and recently resold it at the Winter Antique Show for, according to the article, $2 to $3 million. But you can tell the story.
Okay.
Because I think it gets us into dealers and auctions.
So this was in actually June, last June, that I was looking through the internet, looking at different sales that were coming up. There's a small auction house just outside of Boston, and I see a picture of that table, which is very unusual in our world. It looks very different from anything that we're used to. It is made very differently than anything that we're used to. And the marble, the piece on top, is very different than anything we're used to. And it was cataloged as Irish. Ireland tends to get all the things we don't know if it's English or American, it becomes Irish. So this table is called Irish. The auction house fortunately put a number of photos on the internet, and one photo is of the foot. And the foot is very distinctive, and you can see it when you see the picture. It's like this four-pronged toe. And I saw that, and I said, oh my gosh, I know that foot. That's the foot on two clocks. One at the one is at the Art Institute of Chicago, and the other one is at Chipstone, which is a museum in Milwaukee. They actually supply the Milwaukee Art Museum with a number of pieces. And I thought, oh boy, I got to go up there. So I drive up on a Thursday, see it, spend about 10 minutes with the thing because I don't want somebody to see me looking at it, and then get excited. Go back home, the sale was on a Sunday, the auction was on a Sunday. I don't sleep for basically 3 days. I have backups upon backups for the phone call that I'm waiting to come for this piece. Phone call comes, and the bidding starts, and it's actually going up there a little bit. I mean, the estimate was 2,000 to 3,000. It brought 10 times that, which was still way below where I wanted to go, but I'm getting nervous as it goes up. Hammer comes down, sold. They should have figured something out when I show up at 10 o'clock the next morning to pick the thing up. But then get it back down to the warehouse and spend the next basically 4 or 5 months researching this thing, trying to figure out, is it what I think it is? And sometimes in these things, they're not as clear-cut as you'd like. This is a unique object. There's nothing like it. I have to compare what I see on this piece, the carving, to other carvings by the maker that I think, by the carver that I think this is by. Fortunately, those did work out. I tried some scientific things. Our scientific world, at least in the furniture world, is limited. You can't carbon date because that gives you, what, about 2,000 years, and I can guarantee that's made within the last 2,000 years. I did finish analysis, which is you take a tiny piece of finish, they put it under the microscope, and they can tell the layers of finish. This one would have been finished originally, then probably cleaned, put another finish put on, another finish put on, and you see in on the microscope the layers of finish and the layers of dirt in between each finish. Those checked out to every section that I looked at. The marble was different. The marble was a difficult thing to sort of figure out, and I ended up taking a picture and using Google Images, and they came back with Brescia Roman marble. And as it turns out, in 1750s Boston, there were a lot of people, wealthy people, making the grand tour of Europe and bringing back with them, or having sent back with them, the marbles from Rome. So everything started to come together. It was finally time to get it photographed and show it. I brought it to the Winter Antique Show, which is in January in New York every year. It's sort of our big show. And I was fortunate enough to sell it to a museum, to Chipstone, the one that I mentioned before. And I say fortunate because I'm so glad that it will be out, that people in our world would get to see it, study it, examine it, and they're the right institution because they will write about it. So that's my...
The Antiques Roadshow moment. But so this gets us into, so when I am, because we want to talk about buying and buying art first, if you're buying at auction, buying from a dealer. When I come in to work with a dealer, let's hypothetically say it's you, and what kind of services are you providing? You have an inventory.
Right.
And I asked you this question before, but your inventory is mostly your own capital, right?
Correct, yeah. I mean, I do things on consignment. I will take pieces on consignment, but primarily about 90% of what I have in stock is mine, are things that I own.
And that affects the price you're going to offer me because?
I don't know that it necessarily affects the price. I mean, the piece is worth what the piece is worth, and you'd be willing to pay what the piece is worth. I try not to delineate between the consigned items and my items when I'm selling. It's not always so easy. Obviously, my incentive is to sell my own things. But if the piece is a good piece and it's worthy of a collection, anybody's collection, then it's certainly something that I'd be happy
But
to
I
sell.
presume you're not going to sell to me at a loss. Okay, well, let's have that conversation.
Yeah. Our market has changed dramatically since 2008. I can almost point to the day in 2008, in October 2008. Things that were purchased before that date were much more expensive than they are today. So things that are in inventory from, I mean, if we've been in business since 1901, we have things from prior to 2008. And yes, sometimes you do have to sell for a loss from that market change.
Okay, interesting to know. But, so we have price for a moment, but also what is your role in authenticating? What representations do you make about the things you have that you're offering? And how can I hold you to those representations if they turn out not to be true? How does all that work?
That's a very good question. I mean, there is a guarantee. If I sell something to you, it is what I say it is. You know, obviously if I say it's a chair, it's a chair. But if I say it's a chair made in Philadelphia, and I say that chair was made in Philadelphia in 1770 or circa 1770, giving myself a little leeway, it is what it is. If it turns out that it isn't, if I made a mistake, I take it back. I can take it back either for store credit, you can get your money back. Those are really sort of the two options.
Right.
I mean, there's,
But when if I'm dealing with a dealer, and to be clear, one, Frank and I have a business relation, in that I have bought things from him. I don't get a profit, but it's not a business relation. But, you know, Frank is at the top of the pyramid. If I'm walking into an antique dealer on Highway 1, I may have a very different, you know, somebody claiming something to be something, and that dealer could be just marketing something.
yeah, or could actually be making an honest mistake. I mean, like you said, you go through this magazine, there are probably tens of thousands of people who call themselves antique dealers, and there's no degree that you have to get. There's nothing that all you have to do is say you're an antique dealer, and congratulations, you're an antiques dealer. So yes, I mean, you will find, and there have always been people who have done questionable things. Part of the reason why you go to a reputable dealer is that they know what's happened over the past 100 years. Things have been faked, you know, just made out whole cloth. That's not always the biggest concern. The bigger concern is what's called changing a major into a general, which is you take a plain piece and you make it not so plain. You add carving, you add inlay, you add something to it that makes it much more valuable than it is as just a plain nothing piece. That's where you're concerned, and that's where, if you have somebody who doesn't really know what they're doing, that's a problem. That also can be an opportunity, because if somebody doesn't know what they have, they may have something that's much better than what they think, and that happens quite a bit too.
But by the same token, if I walk into an antique, or an art for that matter, I don't want to limit to antiques, but a paintings dealer, and I see that it's something that the dealer hasn't identified, I don't owe it to tell him, oh, that's a Picasso. I have no obligation to the dealer who's held his shingle out saying, come by and I've priced it. I have no obligation to tell them that you mispriced it or
You
misidentified.
don't, with one exception, and every state is different, but apparently the state of Louisiana has something on the books that if you see something that's grossly misvalued, you're supposed to tell them. I don't know if it's still on the books. That came up, a colleague of mine bought a painting by a very important artist, not a well-known artist, but important in our world, for very little money out of an auction house in New Orleans. And that ended up in a lawsuit for, I think, 5 years. And this was Sumter, actually.
I thought that's what it was.
And he ended up winning the case. But that seems to be the only state where, and I don't know if you as not a professional, I think it may be different if you portray yourself or put yourself out there as a dealer. That was an issue. I think that's the only state in the nation that's like that. And I think, I mean, again, I'm not an attorney, but I think Louisiana has some other odd things as well.
Well, let's, we don't need to go there, at least, maybe during the cocktail hour. But, so let me turn to Aaron. I'm a prospective purchaser of something at auction. What is it, when I look at your catalog, you have announced an auction, it could be on paintings of a certain era, certain artist, could be a collection from a particular collector. I'm a prospective buyer. What do I need to know? What do I need to think about in terms of looking at, you provide, for example, you provide typically an estimate.
Yeah, so the auction house provides a description of the object. Usually it's sort of 5 or 6 lines of the really important things. How big is it? Who painted it? That sort of thing. And then there's additional information as available. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. And then there is an estimate. And an auction estimate is a prediction informed by things that have sold in the past. But you have to keep in mind, too, that the auction estimate is also a selling tool. Much like real estate in San Francisco. If you list the house at $950,000, instead of listing it at $1 million, you're much more likely to get $1.1 million. It's a psychological game, or as we sometimes like to call it, the tyranny of round numbers. But the auction estimate is not something that tells you as a purchaser, unlike in a gallery or a shop, that they'll tell you exactly how much it will cost. The auction house is just saying, well, we think it's going to sell between $8,000 and $12,000. But maybe that day you could buy it for $4,000, or maybe that day it'll cost you $350,000. The market will tell you what it's worth. In terms of our guarantee, and I can't speak to all auction houses, but the big four certainly all have very similar legalese in terms of what they guarantee and what they don't. For paintings, generally it's 1 year from date of purchase. And there are some very specific hoops you have to jump through if you want to return it. And the gist of it is essentially you got to have somebody who is recognized by the market as an expert who says that thing ain't real. And then, you got to unwind the sale. In the auction house's case, we don't have the money anymore. We took commission, right? And then, we need to ask the seller to get the money back. And then if they don't play nice, we can just hand their name off to you. That's part of the contract and how it works. For the auction houses, the thing that they guarantee is what's called the bold description. So it's not even the entirety of the description, it's just one part of it. And then there's lots of fine print about it even further. If you're buying, for instance, Japanese, Korean, or Chinese antiques, the guarantee's 25 days. And then there are much stricter rules about how those things can be returned. The rules are different for wine, they're different for cars. I would say that buying at auction is not the same as buying at a dealer. When you go to a dealer, you are relying on their area of expertise. You're going to talk to Frank because Frank knows more about those tables than anybody else on the planet. When you're going to an auction house, you're not on your own. You ask questions of the staff, but none of the staff are going to claim to be the expert about that kind of table. We are generalists. And then we rely on outside expertise when appropriate. You can't sell a John Singer Sargent as a John Singer Sargent at a major auction house without going through the Sargent Committee, which may meet once or twice a year. And if they say it's not real, it ain't real, done. The auction house won't sell it. There are other auction houses who will just say, well, the thing is signed John Singer Sargent. It's a John Singer Sargent. They'll put it up on the internet and they'll sell it as a John Singer Sargent. There are no art police.
The committee is a committee within Bonhams.
No. It's an outside entity. It's
okay.
a committee. Now, the problem we run into is that there are lots of artists. There's no committee. right? There's a formalized way to figure out if a Rembrandt is a Rembrandt. You can figure out if a Picasso is a Picasso, but there are the vast majority of artists, there's no such committee. So you are relying on the expertise of the auction house. In Bonham's case, they've been doing it since 1793. We're not going anywhere. But the individual staff, may turn over. So maybe you are going to buy something, and the internal expertise has a sum total in the department of 15 years worth of work in the field. They're never going to know as much as Frank would, having spent his entire life within that category. But I know a lot about a little, which is why I do the Antiques Roadshow, right?
Well, and as a purchaser at auction, you've told me about, or you told us about, what description I might have. I buy it. I have a couple of questions. This one, I buy it. Do I then pay a premium on top of the gavel price?
Yeah. So again, all the major auction houses are about the same. Roughly, it's 25% on the first $1 million or so. And then it drops. And that's what you pay as a purchaser. What are you getting for that? You're getting the guarantee that we offer. You are also relying on the sort of reputation and history of said auction house. I would say that we also get paid by the seller. So the auction house takes a commission from the seller, and then we charge the buyer a premium. And that is dependent on the value of the object.
And there's also something called a reserve, which the seller can place on the item.
Correct, and this is a legal thing, actually. So we publish an estimate, $10,000 to $15,000. That means if you show up with $10,000 that day and no one bids against you, you legally must be able to buy it. It's kind of like the bait and switch thing. You can't tell me that Ford F-150 is $27,000, and then I show up and you say, actually, it's $29,950. That's illegal. You can't do that. So the auction houses work by the same rules in that the low bound of the estimate, you legally have to be able to buy it if you get there and no one bids against you. That being said, the reserve could be less than the low bound of the estimate. So I might have an object that is in the auction for $10,000 to $15,000, but I have instructions from the seller, anything over $5,000, sell it. I only have $1,000 into it. I found it here. So, at 5, I don't want to be greedy. I'm glad that you, auction house, thinks it's going to bring $10,000 to $15,000, but $5,000 I will take all day long. In that case, you as the potential purchaser, you don't get to know what the reserve is. The reserve is absolutely confidential. You as the seller would know what the reserve is. The auctioneer knows what the reserve is, but even other staff inside the auction house don't get to know what the reserve is.
Can the auction house bid itself what I would call a phantom bid? I don't know if they still do this, where the auctioneer has the discretion to say up to the reserve.
Right. So that is I'm an auctioneer too. As you can tell, I'm familiar with the microphone. The first thing I say at the beginning of the auction is I give a very brief overrule of the rules. They're all in the fine print in the catalog and on the website. But essentially, I, as the auctioneer, representing the seller, may bid against you to make sure that you get to that reserve, the floor number. Now, if I bid after that, that is massively illegal and a total no-no and ethically, morally problematic, all the things. That's the other thing that you are getting with the very large auction houses. It's just never worth it to them, reputation-wise, to ever mess with that. You will hear the expression called a chandelier bid. I remember the first time my wife came to an auction, the auctioneer that day scared the bejesus out of her because he kept looking at her and saying, $75,000. The real person bidding $80,000, $85,000, and she's looking around at this, but the reserve is $90,000. The auctioneer is protecting the reserve, and then it's all yours.
Now, going to the issue of it's not dealer versus auction house, but I want
No,
to be
no,
very
it's,
clear. There's a very symbiotic relationship.
Absolutely. It's all part of a healthy ecosystem.
On any given auction, do you have a guesstimate? I hadn't asked you this, so you have to either make something up or tell me you don't know. How many dealers are bidding in a given auction versus non-dealers?
It's very category dependent, actually. There's not, there are some categories where I would say 90% of the people bidding are the end user. And then there are other categories where I would say up to 90% of the people bidding are, in fact, people who are going to sell it to the end user.
And Frank, you had mentioned you bid on a lot of auctions because I
Yes.
see your name out there.
Right.
But do the other bidders know that you're bidding, or?
I try to hide it if I can, and I mean, there are two reasons for that. One is I am looking to resell the object. I don't want everybody to know where I got it, what I paid for it. It harms you a little bit when you're negotiating to make the sale. Number two is I don't want to get run up, and it's not the auction houses that are doing it. It's somebody sees, oh, a dealer's bidding on that. Well, he's going to try to make a profit on it. I'm going to bid on it, and if I beat him by one bid, I'm paying less than I would pay to him. So I hide it, and it's gotten so much easier to hide it because of the internet and the phone. I actually sat through, a couple of years ago, we had a major sale at Sotheby's of, the Wolf family collection, which was a major American paintings and furniture collection. And I actually went to the sale and sat through, and there were maybe 12 people in the room. Hundreds of people bidding, and I hadn't been to a sale in a while. I was used to, a crowd like this or bigger in the room. Everybody's on the internet. Everybody's on the phone bidding now, so that's easy to hide.
It's really sad, actually.
It is.
For me, as an
Yeah.
auctioneer, it's way more fun to talk to all of you, like 7,500, really? Okay, 7,500, 8,000. As opposed to, like, person on the screen, 8,500. It's just nowhere near as fun.
It slows it down,
It does go so much slower now.
but it's so nice to sit in your underwear and buy something.
You know what's funny, though, is that the dealers are the ones who complain the most to me about how slow the auction is. It's like, you should be so happy. Because when I started in the 90s, I absolutely saw, like, oh, you're bidding on this? Yeah, I'm bidding. Yeah. And they'd do it on purpose. Asked me at the cocktail hour. I actually saw a fist fight break out in an auction room once over that.
Only one.
Only one. But it is the auction market has really moved. Even the big event auctions. When I worked at that other auction house that ends in an S, we couldn't fit everybody in the room. We had a satellite room with another auctioneer on a podium with a microphone that, the voice just went to the main room. You ended up in that room if we weren't sure you were actually going to bid. But, you could have live bidders in the satellite rooms. Now that's almost unheard of. Even at the most important sales, just not that many people go. And the really professional bidders, a lot of them, some of them want their name in the paper. Oh, yeah, we saw Frank bought that. But a lot of them don't. And so, yeah, they're on the phone. They're bidding on the internet. It's changed the dynamic of the room, for sure. Because there'll be an object, as an auctioneer, when that object comes up, I can tell how many of you are going to bid. I really can. There's a bunch of you who are going to be looking at their phone or drinking a cup of coffee or reading a newspaper because the auctions take a long time. There's only 2 or 3 people that are looking at me. Or I'm about to open the lot and half the room is looking at me like, whoo, we're cooking with gas. Like something fun's going to happen. And now as an auctioneer, I know by registrants, right? I have more data than I ever had before, which can lead to some interesting things. But also, like, I don't know. There might be 10,000 registrants for that online sale, and 9,000 of them want the same 3 objects, but I have 300 other things I have to sell. So it's just different.
Frank, first of all, I'm trying to put aside the image of you in your underwear bidding. I can't get that out. But how much of Frank has a great website, by the way, and in his world, which I've been living in for 25 years, he's one of the few people who does maintain a lot of inventory. but wonderful website. But how much of that inventory, as you said, most of it is you have your own capital in. How much have you acquired at auction versus how much are what you call, I think, round trippers, clients who've sold things back to you? How much of your inventory is from auction?
Well, that's a good question. And let me answer it this way. I would guess about 50-50. But I prefer to buy privately. I find that, first of all, I can sort of head off a great piece going to an auction because we are in competition for the material. I'm fortunate enough to have this heritage going back, sorry, the 120 or so years, so that I do get things that come back over time. Things that we sold maybe 50, 100 years, well, 60 years ago. That will come back, that a family doesn't want anymore. I mean, I just had that happen, sorry, in Washington, D.C. with a collector who, this was his grandfather's stuff, and I was able to buy everything. You still get things from families that the piece was made for. They still do come down in families. I mean, I just had that happen also at the winter show with a high chest. I buy from other dealers. Other dealers will have something that I feel I can do better than they would. I buy from them. You buy from wherever you can. And it's probably about 50-50 auctions. But maybe dollar-wise, it may be closer to 75-25, 75 being private, 25 being auction.
I want to get to, let's flip this around to the sell side. We've been talking about buying. I now want to sell something. I have something, and I gave you guys a fact pattern, sometimes teaching law, so I have fact patterns. And I'm the executor of my great aunt's estate. She has things that she collected for decades, came down in the family. It's highly diverse. It has some furniture that might be right in Frank's wheelhouse, but also she has porcelain, and she has some alleged Picassos, and on and on and on, including, I think I posited some 19th century French pornography because Aunt Grace was a very strange person. But you have a very diverse estate, and my job as an executor is to maximize the value I can get for the estate because all my brothers and sisters want as much money as they can get. So what's the best way? I mean, I can go to Frank. There will be some things you might buy,
Right.
but probably stuff you wouldn't buy. The pornography you can pass on if you want. It's up to you.
Well, that goes to the personal collection. But what I often do, and this happens a lot, I mean, this is something that I deal with quite often, where I'm offered things, some are in my wheelhouse and some are completely different from what I do. The dealer community knows each other. And I do have people that I can work with and put you in touch with for those things that I can't handle. A Picasso I wouldn't even get close to. I wouldn't know value, I wouldn't know authenticity, I wouldn't even try. With the porcelains, there are people I can send you to depending on where the porcelain is from. But the other thing that I've been doing more and more lately is a hybrid, wherein, let's say a major collection comes up of all sorts of different things. Sometimes I'm invited in and I can take the things, and I'm not necessarily creaming the best, but I can take the things that I can sell and do the best for that seller. And the other things that may take a lot longer, and the seller may have a reason that they need to get it done quickly, either an estate or the financial trouble, whatever it is, there are auction houses that I'll work with, both in Americana and not in Americana. And that's been fairly successful because you get the quickness of an auction. I mean, if you send stuff to auction, it's gone. You don't worry about it. If I buy it, it's gone. If I can sign it, you have to be patient. It's going to take some time for it to sell.
Aaron, if I'm now selling, I come to you and the stuff Frank doesn't want, and you can, because you have international offices. Let's speak to that for a second, because some items, I believe, will sell better in certain geographic locations.
Absolutely. You would think that would not be the case, given that everybody's bidding online, perhaps in their underwear. But the fact of the matter is that some objects will do better in New York than they will in Boston, than they will in LA. Or for that matter, I'll get more money in Paris so it goes to Paris. Or I'll get more money in Hong Kong, so it'll go to Hong Kong. As long as the shipping of the object is reasonable, then we'll move it. In terms of the estate scenario, really what the auction house offers is speed. It's done. Like there's a finite timeline. The auction's going to happen, and then it's over. And then the other thing is it does all happen in the public eye, which isn't to say that there's anything wrong with the other model, but for some institutions in particular, it just has to be public auction because then there's no room for anybody to say, oh, so-and-so got a sweetheart deal. No, it happened. It was a public auction. Everybody knew. It was Tuesday at noon. If you wanted to bid, you had to show up.
I'm seeing we have now 2 minutes left. Any questions in those remaining 2 minutes? There's a hand back there. Sorry.
Oh, thank you. How do so many fraudulent art pieces get auctioned for high numbers? And then only some years later it's discovered that they were done in someone's garage. That always amazes me, and it seems to happen quite a bit, even at Art Basel in Miami, for example.
I would say it doesn't happen quite a bit at all, but it's super interesting when it does, so everybody wants to write an article about it. There aren't articles about the 10,000 objects that were exactly what they said they were and were sold. But for the things that are spurious, sure. I mean, also, I think there's a real element of schadenfreude with it. I mean, hey, that rich guy who paid $7 million for a painting and I can't make my house payment, to find out that that guy got taken and it's fake, ha ha ha, I'm going to read that article, click. I mean, people are really interested in it. And also art forgery, there's a grand history of it, furniture forgers. I mean, some of these people we know we're going to see the same things over and over again, but none of us are perfect, and some of them do slip through the cracks. But for that matter, in this museum, and that has nothing to do with it being this museum, I guarantee you there are things on the wall that have plaques next to them that say that they are X and they're Y. It's not perfect.
One other thing just to add to that, and it doesn't answer your question necessarily, but scholarship changes over time. So we may see, and I'm talking in the furniture world, we may have a Pembroke table that was Connecticut, but actually turns out to be by a very now well-known maker out of Sutton, Massachusetts, a guy named Nathan Lombard. That may hit close to home, but so things do change, and we do learn more about the objects. And the opposite actually happens. In my world, there was a book called Fake Fraud and Genuine, I think, was the name of the book. The book itself is a fraud. On the back cover is what she had called a fake Lanwier table. Lanwier was a maker in New York, French origin, came to New York, died in 1819. It had a label. It was at the Winterthur Museum, which is the ultimate collection in our world. 20 years ago, Peter Kenny, a curator at the Metropolitan Museum, did an exhibition on Lanwier, strictly on Lanwier. Guess what's on the back cover of the exhibition on Lanwier? That table. So, I mean, obviously there are fakes, there are real things, and we can tell the difference. But the scholarship changes, and as time we learn more about what we're dealing with, and I think that also has an effect, on some of the things that you're mentioning.
And some of the things are deliberate fakes, and some of the things are not. Some of it is, I mean, there are Rembrandts that were Rembrandts, and then not Rembrandts, and then Rembrandts, and then not Rembrandts. So the painting is still 400 years old. Absolutely beautiful.
I think the music didn't play. You didn't play any music.
Where's the hook?
Yeah. Frank, Aaron, thank you very much.